Hi students! In this lesson, we're going to cover how to create variations in layout in your second spread, introduction to the 4 typographic contrasts, how to work with paragraph type, and then to save and export your file to turn in. Okay, let's get started by building our second spread. First off, make sure you open your template 18 v1 that we created on our previous lesson. And I'm going to try to show you the simplest way to create your second spread. That will be on page 4 and 5. So all you want to do is click and drag and select your type and your image. We're just going to copy. Go to page 4 and 5 and do a paste in place. So now we're set up to build our second spread. The easiest way to create a page layout variation, because right now we have on page 2 and 3 our first spread, where the type is on the left, image is on the right. We don't want to simply repeat that same layout again. It gets kind of repetitive and predictable. So a very, very simple strategy to do is switch the image and text. And that's going to be our first way of creating a page layout. So we're going to take the type, we're going to keep it by holding Shift in place and dragging. And this allows us to align it in the same area for the header and also the body copy. Again, it's the same alignment and the same width distance on the second page. And then we're going to take our image or hold Shift and drag it over until it snaps in place and is centered. So now the next step I want to do is import my new project for our second spread. And if I hit Command D, I'm going to import my project just like before. I'm going to click and drag. Now this image has a slight variation in width in comparison to our first project, and I think the majority of you are going to have the same challenge where your images are all different sizes. So I'm going to show you one approach to help keep things consistent. So what we want to do is scale this image down. First thing I'm going to do is just snap this image to match the left corner of our previous project. And then what I'm going to do is hold Shift and Command just like before. I'm going to scale it down. So it matches our previous, and all I'm going to do is just center this image and then delete the previous. So now if I turn off, what I have is page variation, but the image is the same height. So again, it's framed with the right kind of negative space and it looks great, and there's no issue with how the actual height of the image changes. This also creates a horizon line where these match up from spread to spread. Our next step is to enter our copy for our description. So if I jump over to my text file, I have the new copy I wrote for the description of our second project. Just going to select all the previous copy and then copy and paste the new copy in. And then you'll want to change the title here to the title of the new project. So now I have a new spread created where it varies in a very simple way between the first spread and our second spread. And then the next thing I want everyone to do is we're going to create some versions of how this typography looks. So we want to take our initial spread and we're going to copy and paste that into other pages just so we can create some variations really easily. So I'm going to just copy that, come to the next spread here, and I'm going to paste by holding Shift, Option, Command, V, and this will paste in place. Select the next one, Shift, Option, Command, V, will paste again, and this will paste in place again. Or, and our last one, to create our fifth, you can always go under Edit, Paste in Place. So now we have 5 versions of our second spread created, so we can kind of experiment with our typography. Again, you can always turn the guides on by holding Command and semicolon. And so now we're ready to work with our type. Now we're going to demystify typography for you. It really breaks down to the 4 typographic contrasts, and this is the foundation for how to work with type. Now I'm not talking about drawing letter forms or hand-done typography. I'm just talking about simply working with type on the computer. We'll get into more advanced things like lettering and stuff later on this semester. But really you just have to have the foundation and the basics first. When working with the typographic contrasts, it has a lot to do with choice, making the right choices and trying to control what you're choosing. And again, keeping it simple isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're first starting. You want to understand why you're making the choices you are. So, the 4 typographic contrasts are pretty simple to understand and to apply. They will give you a ton of variations within your typographic choices. So the first one is really easy to understand. It's size. And when we laid out our header and our type, as we see in our project here, we use size to create a variation and establish an initial hierarchy. So we have our header that's set at a size of 18 and our body copy that was set at a size of 12 point. Simple size variation is the easiest way to create hierarchy in our design. The second is choosing weight. So if I was to come back and change the weight of Helvetica to bold, we can see the choice difference, and also helps establish a better hierarchy. Same with if I was to do an experiment and see what it looked like in light, just to see the contrast as well. What I'll ask you not to do is make a whole paragraph of copy set in bold, because 1, it's just hard to read, and 2, it's just kind of obnoxious. So again, rule of thumb, try to keep your paragraph copy as legible as possible by always setting it to like a regular of the typeface choice. The next choice is working with case. And again, this is pretty simple to understand, the difference between uppercase and lowercase. So in this example, I have uppercase in Headman on the P and the H, but also I can look at a version where it's set in all caps. So I know that seems simple, but the tone changes quite a lot between upper and lowercase and all caps. Also the legibility and the size and readability makes a difference as well. And then our last one is face, and we'll cover this about 2 or 3 lessons from now, how to create variations with different typefaces. But the main 3 things I want you to practice in this lesson is change in size, change in weight, and change in case for your examples. Okay, now we're ready to work with some type. We went over the 4 contrasts, and now we're going to apply them to our header and our body copy, and we're going to create 5 examples of how that type can look. So I'm going to leave our first header example, which we already use size because the header is at 18 and the body copy, or the description copy, is at 12. So we're just going to leave this example in place. We're going to go down to our next spread, and what we're going to do is just look at a version that is set in bold. And again, this helps establish a little bit better hierarchy and emphasis because of the contrast and weight. So now we're applying size and weight to the type. And again, you can write, and you should write these down and understand what you're using on your header copy, what choices you're making. So the next example I'm going to work with is I'm going to do it set in light, but this time I'm going to set it to all caps. Now if you like the all caps setting, you can make another version where you use it in bold to see how it looks like in bold and all caps. So again, you can create quite a few different variations just by changing the weight, the size, and the case of our typography. So for the last 2 variations, what I'm going to have everybody do is change the size dramatically. So let's say this time I'm going to set it to 30. And again, remember, if you get the little red plus, that means that the box is too small. So now I have the typeset at about 30 point. And we want to turn our guides back on because we'll make sure that that horizon line where we place the type is always consistent. So even if we change the size, we want to make sure the placement is consistent. And then we can do a last example that maybe is set in all caps. And this time maybe it's set to 48. You can tell that this is probably not the best option. So obviously we want to bring the size down so that it fits all in one line. So maybe select, see, it still doesn't quite fit. So maybe 30 point is the best option for all caps. And then the same as before, just going to align it to that guide. And now we've created a couple different options for our header. So you can experiment with this. Again, you just want to use size, case, and weight. Okay, now we're ready to work with our paragraph settings. What I mean by paragraph settings is how to control your description text to make it look as nice as we possibly can. So we've been working with type where we click inside the box and we select all or Command A, and this is how we've been changing the settings, and this is fine. But there's also another way you can work with type. If you go under Window, you can bring up the type palette. So if you go to Type and Tables, select Character, and then that's for controls of the typeface. And then this is for the control of the paragraph. So I have these 2 palettes up. What I want to do is just put them together. So now I have character control, paragraph control. And what I'm going to do is just drop this into our main menu here. So our goal is to create a very nice paragraph of description copy. I'm going to go over 2 typographic terms that you really need to know that will help with controlling how our body copy looks. So the first thing we want to do, as we can see, is the hyphenation really makes an ugly paragraph here in comparison to a paragraph that looks pretty nice in the bottom. So to change the hyphenation, if you click the overall box for the description copy, you come to paragraph, you can turn off the hyphenate. So what happens when we take the hyphenation away is the paragraph rag. Now, paragraph rag is one of those typographic terms that you really need to know. And it's pretty simple to understand. What the rag means is how the outside edge of the paragraphs flow. And a simple way of looking at it is how you get weird negative spaces that happen in your line lengths. So right now, because multifunctional doesn't fit up here, it creates a really weird negative space that when we look at the overall paragraph, when it prints, it just looks wrong. So a simple hack to get these things to work a little bit better is if you slightly pull out the paragraph, it'll rewrap it, and you can see that these paragraphs look much nicer now. So again, that's basic control. So previous example, get this really weird negative space. If we just do a slight tweak, slight adjustment, we can get that to rewrap. The next typographic term that you need to know is what's called a widow. And a widow is when you have one word sit below a whole line, a whole sentence of text. So a basic hack for that is to come in, take the word in the previous line, and if you do a shift return, you can push it down. And that helps with the overall look of the line. Now, obvious, this creates another weird negative space here. So what you could do, depending on how the paragraph reads, is you could actually bring that down on its own line. So again, these are two basic little hacks you can do to really control and have a nicer paragraph rag, and then also to be able to make sure you don't have any widows. So now we're going to go over creating some paragraph variations. So what I mean by paragraph variation is the overall size and the height of the type. So right now we have it set to a default. So it's set at 12-point type and 14.4 leading. So leading is probably our last really important typographic term of this lesson. And leading simply means the space between each individual sentence or line. So if I select all of this text here and I increase the leading, it increases the spacing between each line of text. So now I'm going to go through some standard settings that you can experiment with for your paragraph text. So if I select all, again, we're just going to keep using Helvetica because I want to make sure everybody sees the variation and we're not setting a bunch of different typefaces. So always make sure you're using Helvetica. For our paragraph, we're just going to keep it set to regular. We don't want to work with bold or light or anything else. We just want to see the difference in the paragraph settings. So the first setting I'm going to do is set it at 8-point type, and I'm going to do 10-point leading. And we can see that it drastically changes how the type is presented on the page. And it also changes how our rag works. So now we might go back and reset this rag so that it sits clean on the page. So the first one I want you to set is at 8 and 10, just to see how that's going to look when we print it out. The next one I'm going to have you set, and again you can do it in the character setting here, we'll do one set at 9, and we'll set this one at 12. And you can start to see the difference as we experiment with the size and also the overall leading. So the next one we're going to do is set at 10, and this time we're going to set it at 14-point leading. So what I want everybody to see as we go through these different examples is if I change the leading to be more open, what this does is it actually kind of changes the color of the page. We can see that there's less black. It's more open, so it doesn't seem as dense. In comparison, if I change the leading from 10 to 12, let's say the 10 to 12, the density of black changes. So it's simple to kind of see. You can see how the color changes here, here, and here. The more I open it up, the lighter the page feels. So again, these are just options of what to experiment with when you're working with paragraph settings. If you do it too far, it actually makes it kind of hard to read the overall paragraph. So again, it's an experimentation to see what the best setting is for the paragraph or description copy you've written. So this one, I'll go back to the original settings at 10 and 14. So we've set a paragraph at 8 and 10, 9 and 12, 10 and 14, and we'll set a last one at 12, and let's see what it looks like at 18. So again, I forgot to change. You want to go through and turn off the hyphenation on each one of these, and the last one I'll let you experiment with. Maybe you want to do a character that's really big. Maybe we'll do like 18 with 24 leading, just to see how that prints and how that looks. So every time you change the overall size and the leading, what you want to do is go through, just like we talked about before, make sure the hyphenation is turned off, and then also you don't have any widows, and you're trying to get the best rag you possibly can. So again, you can pull that in, or you can kind of pull that out to see what the best solution is. So for your 5 examples, we'll do 8 and 10, 9 and 12, 10 and 14, 12 and 16, and then a example that you're going to experiment with. It could be smaller or larger type. You'll want to go through and make sure all your hyphenation is turned off, and then also trying to control and clean up the rag of the paragraph the best you possibly can. So this is going to give you a lot of variation, and you're going to print your 5 examples, and we're going to take a close look at what the best option can be. Now we've created our 5 example spreads for our second project. What I want you to do is print out all 5 spreads in black and white, and I want you to go through and review the size difference in the header, also the weight in the case, and look at those choices really closely and choose one that you think works really well. And when we review it, you can tell me why you think it works. And secondly, go through and look at all your paragraph rags and the leading between each version, and take a close look at, and again, when we come to review, tell me why you think the one you like is the best option. So again, you want to go through and make sure all the rags are perfect and you have no widows and no hyphenation in your paragraphs. So once you have it perfect, you've printed it out, reviewed it, and then made adjustments, you're ready to turn your PDF file in. So the first thing we want to do is save a new version of our document, and we're going to set it at template 18 v2, and we're just going to save that. So again, really want to do versioning of our file. Version 1 has our first spread, version 2 has our first spread and our second spread. And once we've saved a version of our InDesign file, again, you want to make sure that you're saving it in the same folder with the previous version with your links folder. Again, if you save it somewhere else, it'll break the links and you'll have to reconnect and tweak all that. So again, it's just easier. Make sure you're saving in the same place where all of your artwork files are. So now we want to go to exporting our file. It's the same process as before. We want to go to Adobe PDF presets. We're going to do smallest file size. And we're going to, again, you have our username. We're going to do assignment 2, book v2, and then hit save. Export all pages, hit export. Don't worry about this. It'll be exporting your file. When that disappears, it's ready to go. You'll go to our assignments, week 1, assignment 2, spread 2. And what you want to do is click the delivery method for the Google Drive for the file. Find your file. Fortunately, I have everything open right now. I apologize. And go to where your folder is for your project. Take your PDF version A2, book V2, drag and drop, upload your file, and you've turned in assignment 2 now. Our lesson has now come to an end. We covered how to create a page layout variation with our second spread, the 4 typographic contrasts and how to apply them to our header and description copy, how to work with paragraph type using leading, adjusting our rags, and getting rid of hyphenation, and then lastly, how to save and export our project. Hope everybody had a good time with their page layout and with learning new typographic skills. Wish you all the best of luck, have fun, and happy designing.